More than any other Pokemon game in recent memory, there was a lot of hype around Pokemon Scarlet and Violet as the first open-world entry in the franchise, and almost as soon as the game was released, all that hype came crashing down. The game's lackluster graphics, terrible render distance, and tendency to drop frames, a lot of frames, or just drop you through the map, caused much of the player base to straight up drop the game, including me, a lifelong Pokemon fan. And I was in deep. I had bought the Scarlet and Violet Switch, which is just beautiful, so I was really bummed that the game was so bad. And it would take me almost a year to pick the game back up and realize just how wrong I was. I mean, the technical issues, even with all the patches, were still there, but despite that, this might be the most fun I've ever had playing a Pokemon game. And I owe a lot of that to Paldea's open world that made me want to do something I had never really done before in a Pokemon game. Just stop and enjoy the atmosphere. Paldea somehow manages to be vast, diverse, and honestly really cozy all at the same time. And that drove me to want to know more about what inspired it. The Iberian Peninsula, made up of Spain, Portugal, and Andorra. And I've got to say, there is an astounding level of detail here, more than I have time to cover in a single episode. So come take a seat at the bar, and I'll make you the local cocktails from the real-life locations that inspired Pokemon Scarlet and Violet as we drink our way around the east side of Paldea and learn all the details of why Lavencia's skyscrapers look so funky, or why there's a Chinese bamboo forest in a game based on Spain, or most importantly, why is Quaquavale so fabulous? Today on Mixing Media. Of course, we had to start with Spain's most famous drink, sangria, which is, hold on. Yeah, just as good as I remember it being. I mean, how could fruit, sugar, and wine mixed together be bad? But sangria is more of a tourist thing, so we'll get into what the locals are actually drinking in a minute. But for now, we need to pick our starter. For my playthrough, I picked Fuecoco, who's based on Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, a holiday celebrated in the former Spanish colony of Mexico. Dia de los Muertos is pretty well known in American culture, even being the basis for the best Pixar movie, Coco. That's right, I said it's the best. But for those unaware, it's a celebration of the dead that involves decorating sugar skulls called calaveras with patterns similar to those found on Crocolore's face. Now, Skeledirge's ghost typing may be owed to the belief that during Dia de los Muertos, spirits of the deceased return home to spend time with their families. But the fact that it looks like a crocodile may find its roots in the Spanish folktale Croc de Nacoca, the legend of a dragon that would snatch children off the streets of Palma until being slayed by a brave knight, who was disappointed to discover it was actually a fairly small crocodile that you can still see at a museum to this day. Next up is Paldea's most Spanish starter, Sprigatito, who's based on the Iberian lynx, a feline native to Spain that's also the most endangered feline in the world. Other than being almost entirely dead, the Iberian lynx is also known for its unique tufts of hair on the lower edges of its face that you can find on Sprigatito and its evolutions. The name Sprigatito contains the Spanish word gatito, which means kitten, but it doesn't stay a kitten for long, because 16 levels later, it evolves into Florgato, whose boot-pattern fur and mischievous nature is a reference to Puss in Boots. I gotta say, I felt really stupid when I realized that Puss in Boots was an actual European fairy tale and not just a character from Shrek. I guess my American is showing. Last but not least is Quaxley, who's based on a South American crested duck but ends up closer to a peacock by the time it evolves into Quaquaval. The name Quaquaval is a combination of Quaqua, which is the Portuguese equivalent of quack quack, and Carnaval, which is a reference to Rio Carnaval, a celebration in one of Portugal's former colonies, Brazil. And if you've ever seen the performers at Rio Carnaval, it really clears up why Quaquaval is out here looking like a sassy peacock. But this sassy peacock is also well versed in Brazil's samba dance and martial art capoeira. Now that we've met the starters, it's time to start our journey that begins under the terracotta roof of our classic Spanish-style house, where we pass a picture of a Sevillanas dancer. Sevillana is a style of dance from the city of Sevilla, or in English, Seville, that's also known for its bitter Seville oranges. Speaking of oranges, after we say goodbye to our mom and her weird squirrel, we're met with her garden, filled with all sorts of traditional crops like oranges, olives, and pumpkins grown in Spain's Andalusia region, or as Paldea calls it, South Province. Now, I don't know what our absentee father or potentially single mother does for a living, but we must be loaded. I mean, look at this house. We're living off a seaside cliff with a beautiful garden yard down the street from Nimona's giant mansion, which is actually our next destination. You know, with how cozy our house is, her mansion really feels just uncomfortably empty, but one thing it does have is a painting in the surrealist style of Spanish artist Joan Miró. But that's about it, so we can continue on to Poco Path. This area is pretty short, and I don't find the lighthouse to be a reference to any particular one in Spain, but I will say one of my favorite things about any Pokemon game is returning to early routes like this to see what unexplored areas are now within my reach. There's just something so satisfying about climbing up those tall cliffs and watching the mountains that were once strict barriers between areas now bleed together into a truly open world where I can go anywhere. Also, there's a sick water slide up here. In the opposite directions of the mountains are the subterranean caverns of the Inlet Grotto based on the caves of Nerja. These caves are a big tourist destination where people can see ancient cave paintings and learn about the humans and animals that coexisted in them all the way back to 25,000 BC. Though you won't find any glowing moss in Nerja. This is probably based on goblin's gold that can be found in North America and Japan, but not Spain. With the Gothic architecture of our new school looming on the horizon, we must first pass through Los Platos, a small town with an oddly large amount of yellow mailboxes. But if you're paying attention, you'll notice that our house, and basically every house in the game, has a yellow mailbox. And this is also true of Spain. This is because Spain's 300-year-old national mail carrier, Correos, uses the color yellow for all its branding. And yes, I know that R should be rolled, but I can't really roll my R's. Or, well, I can, but only in the cheat way in the back of your throat that sounds kind of like Chewbacca. Okay, anyways, it looks like we've reached the bridge to the biggest city in southern Paldea, Mesagoza. The three bridges that cross over Mesagoza's natural moat are based on Puente de Alcatara in western Spain that was originally built by the Romans and was rebuilt and rebuilt and rebuilt again after being destroyed in basically every war. Now that we've arrived in Mesagoza, before we head to the Academy, why don't we sit down at one of the city's many cafes and order ourselves one of the most iconic cocktails in southern Spain, the REBUJITO. The REBUJITO combines lemon lime soda with Andalusia's specialty, fino sherry, produced in the Sherry Triangle on the region's western coast. Sherry has long been a major export of the region, which is why some believe the REBUJITO's roots lie in the American cocktail, the sherry cobbler. Oh, man. Spanish cocktails are the best. This is so good. And, you know, with sherry as the base spirit, you're not going to get wasted on a REBUJITO. It's a good low alcohol option if you're, say, trying to explore the rest of Paldea. Now, Mesagoza is an amalgamation of many of Spain's largest cities, but it also contains a ton of references to Portugal, which I'm sure Portuguese players are thrilled about, because if I learned anything in researching this, it's that they're pretty bitter about always being overshadowed by Spain. Or, to put that in terms Americans can understand, Portugal is like the Canada of Europe. I'm not sure who's going to be more offended by that, the Portuguese or the Canadians. But the first of these references to Portugal are the roses of winds we encounter around the main plaza that are reminiscent of Rosa dos Vento in Portugal's capital city, Lisbon, though the plaza itself is likely a reference to Plaza Mayor in Spain's capital city, Madrid. The colorful buildings surrounding the plaza are also reminiscent to Lisbon, with the yellow and black color scheme possibly referencing the Barro Alto Hotel. And while the flower mosaics can once again be found in Lisbon, the rest of the mosaic work is likely a reference to Parc Güell in Barcelona, whose mosaics were created by the famous artist Antoni Gaudí. But as beautiful as Parc Güell is, Gaudí's most famous work would be the Catholic church La Sagrada Familia, which may look familiar to you because it's the basis for the Academy. The story of La Sagrada Familia is kind of crazy because Gaudí spent 40 years of his life working on it, all the way up until his death in 1926, at which point it was about a quarter of the way done. In fact, construction just hit the halfway point in 2010, and the next milestone won't be till 2026, which makes it the largest unfinished Catholic church in the world. On the much less holy side of things, the branching layout of the school is based on Barcelona's prison, Carcel Modelo de Barcelona. And yes, I could take the low-hanging fruit and make a school equals prison joke, but life already did that for me. Schools often are based on prison floor plans or made by prison architects. It's more common than you'd think. The high school I went to was actually based on a prison. And no, it wasn't just a prison. Once inside, we're met with the Academy's enormous library that, thanks to these extremely low frame rate Neubats, I can tell you is based on Biblioteca Joanina, one of 2 libraries in the world to intentionally infest itself with a colony of bats as a form of pest control. They eat the insects, so the insects don't eat the books. Now, my first thought when I heard this was, what about all the bat poop though? But not to worry, because every night employees cover everything in leather sheets and clean up all the guano in the morning. And while that seems like a lot of work, because it is, with how valuable guano is as a fertilizer, or if you're Dr. Stone, a depetrification agent, I wouldn't be surprised if they've got a profitable little side hustle selling it. As we regroup with our friends, Nimona will give us the usual quest of beating 8 gym leaders, Arvin will send us after the rare Herba Mystica so he can make some magical sandwiches, and the mysterious Cassiopeia will task us with taking down this generation's kid-friendly mafia, Team Star. With the direction of those 3 quests, we begin our journey through Greater Paldea, trading in Mesagoza's brick roads for the desert cliffs and tunnels of South Paldea Area 3. Really rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? This area matches up geographically with the Tabernas Desert, the only true desert in Europe and the place to be if you're trying to film a spaghetti western. Spaghetti westerns are a subgenre of old western movies that were shot in Europe and were often created by Italians, hence the name spaghetti western, because I guess a lot of Americans in the 60s thought, oh, it's Italian? Hey, spaghetti! Though I'm not sure that that's really changed too much. If you're curious how spaghetti became such a big part of American culture, I did a whole episode on that you can check out on screen or down in the description, where if you're anything like me, you'll be surprised to learn that Chef Boyardee was actually a real guy. So as we walk through the route, I'm reminded of why I find Paldea to be so cozy. Even though it's this crazy desert obstacle course filled with these dark caves, the world is so dense that you're never really too far from the comforting glow of the Pokémon Center sign or the lights that illuminate the bridge back to the city. And if you climb high enough, you can even see the spotlights of Lavencia's skyline or the snowy peaks of Glaseado Mountain. Reminds me of being a kid and being small enough to have an adventure amongst my dad's junk in the garage, only with the concerningly large spiders replaced with Pokemon. And one of the Pokemon you can find walking around here, Charcadet, has some really deep Spanish history behind it, but that history depends on which set of armor you use to evolve it. Scarlet's auspicious armor will evolve Charcadet into Armarouge, who's based on the famous Spanish knight Gefre el Pilos, aka Wilfred the Hairy. Don't ask why he's called that. All we know is his mother was quoted saying, he has hair where other men don't, which I'm sure he was super psyched that his mom shared for the history books. Wilfred is most known for uniting the core of what would become the Catalan Empire around Barcelona in northeastern Spain. And while protecting his empire, he suffered a serious chest wound. But that wasn't going to slow down Wilfred the Hairy, as he still successfully warded off all the invaders. And in honor of his bravery, a Frankish king would dip his hand into the blood from the wound and run his fingers down Wilfred's golden shield, inspiring the 4 red stripes on the Catalan flag and the yellow and red color scheme of Armarouge. Now in Violet, you receive the malicious armor that evolves Charcadet into Cyrilege, who's based on another famous Spanish knight, El Cid. Or well, that was his title, translating to the Lord, but his real name was Rodrigo Diaz de Vivar, and he conquered the Levante region that makes up the eastern side of Spain. He was known to wield 2 swords, Tizona, which was thought to be magical, and Colada, which I guess was just a sword. And this is why Cyrilege has swords instead of hands, though I imagine it's not thrilled about that when Armarouge got opposable thumbs, but man, if those swords don't give me flashbacks to Mega Man NT Warrior. Cyrilege's ghost typing can be attributed to El Cid's greatest feat, fending off a siege on Valencia while already dead. Or at least that's how the legend goes. In reality, after dying of natural causes, his wife, Jimena, had his body fitted with armor, placed atop a horse, and paraded around the street to boost the morale of the troops who actually fought off the invaders. So with that under our belt, we can move past the desert into the artsy city of Azatron. Sprinkled across the town are sunflora, both real and statue, because Andalusia is well known for its sunflowers. Deeper into the town, we can find a low frame rate windmill that's a reference to Don Quixote, a famous Spanish novel often considered the first ever novel about a man named Don Quixote, who read so many tales of knights and chivalry that he went insane and picked a fight with a giant. Only it turns out the giant was actually a windmill and he was actually just crazy. And he still lost the fight. Beside the windmill, you can find a hedge maze that's a reference to the one in Rafael de la Cerda Park in Cartagena, which aligns with Azatron's placement on the map. Only difference is Cartagena's maze is 5 kilometers, so you legitimately might never escape. But if you do make it out, you'll probably be hungry, so why not head to the nearby cafe and get some classic Spanish desserts like alfajores, cookies made from nuts and honey, or a churro, which I didn't realize was actually invented in Spain. Or if you want something a little more savory, you could take the old lechonk around back and see if it lives up to its name, which contains the word lechon, meaning suckling pig. Hey, I didn't want to say it, but you know these people are eating Pokémon. So with our bellies full and our ethics questionable, we can venture north of Azatron into the rolling green hills of the eastern provinces, heeding the call of Lavencia's big city lights. And these hills are a really great place to pick up some Pokémon. I wanted to get a Toedscool as soon as possible, and it has about a 2% encounter rate in this area, so I spent a lot of time here. Totally worth it though, look at this silly little weirdo. But this is also your first opportunity to capture a Paldean Tauros, whose black color scheme is a reference to the Spanish fighting bull, the Toro Bravo. The base breed is the easiest to find, but there's also the Blaze breed, whose fire typing is a reference to the controversial practice Toro Embalado, where a bull's horns are set on fire before it's released to chase people around the city. Then there's the Aqua breed that's water typing is a reference to the equally controversial Bus a la Mar, where runners try to goad a bull into falling into the Mediterranean Sea. Now, I know these practices sound cruel, but it's pretty on brand for a game about capturing animals and forcing them to fight your battles for you, which is, you know, I guess kind of sad when you think of it that way. Hey look, it's Lavencia! Valencia has a really futuristic vibe, which is amazingly contrasted by the almost untouched nature on either side of it. I mean, the road literally just ends at the edge of town and becomes a dirt path. Terribly impractical, but wonderfully charming. I mean, I want this in real life. I want to be able to climb to the top of a skyscraper and just look out at nothing but empty hills and ocean. And then in the marina, there's these billboards, which I had never really stopped to look at before, but they really put a lot of effort into these ads. They've got Quaxwell out here trying to get me to sign up for a new credit card. When I'm not getting sucked in by fake ads, I like to appreciate the avant-garde architecture inspired by Cuatro Torres in Madrid and the City of Arts and Sciences, which is a group of futuristic buildings housing everything from cinemas to museums to concert halls found in Lavencia's real-life counterpart, Valencia, which is also a great place to get some Agua de Valencia, the city's signature cocktail. Agua de Valencia combines the juice of local Valencia oranges, a split base of gin and vodka, and most importantly, Spain's version of champagne, cava. And it was actually cava that inspired its creation when, in 1959, artist Constante Gil was challenged to put a new spin on the plain old cava the regulars at Café Madrid were always drinking. Now, before I tried the drink itself, I've actually never had cava, which, you know, like I said, is just Spain's version of champagne, so I'm gonna take a little from the bottle and, at risk of looking like an alcoholic. Ooh. See, I don't really like champagne, but this is good. It feels a lot more spicy. All right, as for the drink itself, oh, that's good. It's like an improved mimosa. Although I think I just like the cava better on its own. This is definitely one of those drinks that kind of like sneaks up on you because it has a lot more alcohol in it than you taste. So be careful with the Agua de Valencia. I really need to. This is what, my third drink of the day? And we still got more! With our thirst quenched and Pokemon's first in-universe influencer thankfully behind us, great character design, but no one asked for this, Game Freak. Somebody probably asked for it. We can take our first steps into northeastern Paldea, though remember to stop by the lighthouse and admire Lavencia's high-res skyline because it's only getting more polygonal from here. Now it's on to another desert, only this time it's got weirder rocks. East Province Area 3's lumpy rock formations are a reference to the ones found in the Monegros Desert, which is home to an annual music festival that's basically the Coachella of Spain. But the scaffolding littered around the area may be a reference to the archaeological site Atapuerca, where excavation revealed some of the earliest fossils of humans in Europe, and a new dinosaur called the Concavinator, or Concavinator? I'm gonna go with Concavinator. It sounds like it could be a WWE wrestler. Either way, it's the basis for this generation's pseudo-legendary Baxcalibur. On the western outskirts of the desert lies the small town of Zapapico, and I gotta ask for your help here because I couldn't really find anything that matched this area. All I know is it's probably someplace where people are living in the walls, so if you got any ideas, let me know down in the comments. From here, we could start the climb up Glaseado Mountain, but instead, I say we head back east into Tagtree Thicket, whose painted trees are based on Olma Forest in Spain's Basque Country. These trees were painted by Agustin Ibarola, who actually just recently passed away in 2023 at the age of 93. His goal with Olma Forest was to create a commentary on the harmonious and often destructive relationship between humans and nature. But in-game, it's just some monkeys spitting on a tree. And that is not a joke. You can find graffiti in the area who use their paint-like saliva to graffiti the trees, and their extra long fingers act as paintbrushes and a reference to the eye, a lemur with a truly disturbing set of fingers. On the northern edge of Tagtree Thicket, we can scale a sheer cliff face and find ourselves in the northern provinces. These are home to the pointiest peaks in Paldea based on the Picos de Europa, and while those are basically all limestone, the ones in the game have a lot of black mineral deposits, which I couldn't find any real-world reference for. Again, if you have any ideas, let me know down in the comments. But something I do know is that it was a great idea to put rev rooms in this area. I love seeing sentient cars scaling mountains. Down below these peaks lies a bamboo forest that, if the bamboo didn't do it, the background music filled with one of the most iconic Chinese instruments, the erhu, will tell you is a reference to China. But what's a reference to China doing in a world based on the Iberian Peninsula? Look no further than the Portuguese colony of Macau that lasted 442 years before being officially handed back to China as recently as 1999. This came after the country's new democratic leadership committed to decolonization. On the Spanish side of the peninsula, there was also trade going on with China through the Manila Galleon, which connected Spain, Mexico, at the time called New Spain, and Asia. If we take a history class back at the Academy, we can learn that this connects to the lore of the four treasures of ruin, who were brought to Paldea by Eastern traders and awakened by the king's greed. After destroying most of Paldea, hence the ruins everywhere, they were eventually sealed in vaults hidden across the region, one of which you can find back in the North Province's bamboo forest above Fury Falls, which is itself a reference to the waterfall Soto de la Novia in the small village of Navajas. This translates to Jump of the Bride, named after an old local tradition where new brides would have to jump across the river that feeds into the falls. If they succeeded, it was a sign of a happy marriage to come. But legend has it that there was one bride who failed her jump, slipping off the opposite bank and falling into the river. Her husband immediately jumped in to save her, but the current was too strong and they both ended up getting swept away. Some locals say you can still hear their voices and see the bride's wedding dress reflected in the unnaturally bright glow of the moonlight on the falls. So yeah, I can see why it's called Fury Falls. I'd be pretty pissed too if I had to jump across a river in a wedding dress and then die on my wedding day. But with the northern provinces thoroughly explored, we can climb the steep trail into what might be my favorite region of Paldea, Glaseado Mountain. The first thing I like to do when I get to Glaseado Mountain is to go into the options and just turn off the background music. Don't get me wrong, I love the soundtrack, but there's just something so serene about listening to the ambience of the wind whipping past you and the gentle rustle of the icy snow under Coridon's feet. And I think this is best appreciated at Glaseado's peak, where you can just sit and look out at the entirety of Paldea, or maybe just watch the snowfall for a bit. But that's enough waxing poetic from me. Let's have another drink, one of the most iconic drinks of northern Spain's Basque Country. The calimocho came to be in 1953 after Coca-Cola opened their first Spanish factory and someone had the bright idea to combine wine from the nearby Rioja region with the newly available sugary beverage. I'm not gonna lie, one of the main reasons I wanted to make this is because I thought it sounded really weird, so let's see if that's actually true. I don't know that this one's it, guys. At least not for me. Sorry to all the Basque Country calimocho lovers out there, but I'm gonna have to say pass on this one. And I'm also going to say that it's probably a bit too cold to be drinking atop the highest point in Paldea. And being the highest point in Paldea, Glaseado Mountain shares something in common with Mulsaheen in the Sierra Nevada mountain range that stands at 11,414 feet above sea level, making it the highest point in Spain. Though geographically, it's a much closer match to the country's third highest peak, Aneto, in the Pyrenees mountain range. Either way though, both mountain ranges are popular skiing destinations, explaining the town's skiing minigame and the gym leader Grusha's love of snowboarding. And from Glaseado ski slopes, we can spot the candlelit cottages of the town with the best vibes in the whole game, Monte Nevera. But for today, our journey ends here. Now this episode took a ton of research, so if you enjoyed it, like, subscribe, and most importantly, let me know down in the comments if you'd like to see me guide you through the rest of Paldea. Oh, and if any Spanish or Portuguese natives are watching, I'd love to hear if anything was wrong or I missed anything, and you know, I guess how was my pronunciation? I don't know that I want to know that, but that's it for me today. I'm Austin. Go dump whatever red wine you got laying around into some soda and let me know what you think when I see you here next time on Mixing Media. Bye-bye. Yeah, still not very good.